In Sweden, the quotas are not even like, you don't have to have it 60-40 or 50-50 women, men, authors in your curriculum, in the reading list. They count the number of pages. So if you're assigning 1,600 pages in a graduate course from male authors, then you have to assign 1,600 pages from female authors. That's the level of madness. And I'm sorry to use this word, this is madness.
Welcome to the New Flesh Podcast, the podcast you deserve. My name's Jonathan Astro, and with me is Ricky Allpike. Ricky, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you going?
Pretty good, Ricky. Now, people, I feel like there's a thirst out there for, people want to know more about us. They want to know about what's going on behind the scenes, personal stuff.
Yeah.
There is, isn't there? You've been out with a couple of people, and they've gone, why don't you, give us a bit? They're hungry, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, all right. Well, I thought I'd start. I got fired. So
yeah, you did.
I did. I got fired from a job, and now, can you believe that, Ricky? They fired me. I'm a peach. You don't throw away.
I am surprised.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there is a point to this. So basically, sure, I talked back to everyone, and I was sullenly stalking around and whatever, but I was always on time.
That is good. Yeah.
So,
is it because you're a TERF?
Well, I don't know. I think it's because I'm just a bit rock and roll, a bit dangerous, a bit ooh, But anyway, the point
if they only knew how boring you really are.
Yes, I know. They could have just asked me. But the point is, this pertains to today's guest because Umut, now Umut's last name is going to kill us today. So Umut, he's just got to come to terms with the fact that we are horrible parochials. Umut Özkırımlı, who's written a fantastic book called Cancelled. Now, the reason I mentioned my little story there was because, I think everyone should have a big think, because if you think that you might have slipped into, you might be conservative, like hard-bitten conservative at heart, I would encourage you to work for a hard-right organisation. And you will be disabused of it, I think. Or maybe not. Maybe I think it'll be a good litmus test for you if you fit in. You're still working there, but if you're like me, out on your ass, Ricky.
Yeah, well, I think we're living in strange times because we've kind of forgotten what left and right used to be about, And then when you engage a little bit deeper with someone who might be very conservative, or an organisation like yourself, engaging with a very conservative organisation, you go, hang on a minute, like, yeah, sure, they're not into the whole trans thing, but they're not into anything else I'm into. They don't care about art, they don't care about movies. It's pretty boring.
Well, your words, but I'm not disputing. So anyway, I just thought that'd be a nice little taster for people. They want to know more, so let's give them more, I say. But today's guest, Umut Özkırımlı, fantastic. I think he's going to challenge some of our listeners in different ways, because he's taken it to some people who we've interviewed, and I look forward to hearing all about that.
He absolutely hates some of the people that we've spoken to, which is great, which is good, by the way.
It is good, because we want to be the home for everyone, really.
Well, what we don't want to be is an echo chamber, Yes. So we talk to anyone who's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so if you haven't been on the show, you're a bore. That's what
that's right.
That's what Ricky's saying.
Oh, okay. Well, we always tell you the truth here at the New Flesh Podcast, and the truth is that we need your help. We need you to leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to the show. We're also on YouTube, so please subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a comment about a show you liked, or perhaps one that you didn't. Word of mouth is also a very powerful tool, so please tell all of your friends. If they don't listen, are they really your friends? And finally, to our Uber fans, if you love what we do, you can send us a little cash via the Buy Me a Coffee platform. Any donation here is very much appreciated. And now, on with the show.
Umut Özkırımlı is a senior research fellow at IBEI, which is the Institut Barcelona de Estudis Internacionals, a professor at Blanquerna, Ramon, Llull University, and a senior research associate at Barcelona Center for International Affairs. He is also the academic director of the Barcelona Summer School of the Mediterranean and the Middle East. He is the author of the acclaimed Theories of Nationalism, a critical introduction, currently in its third edition. His writings appear frequently in The Guardian, openDemocracy, Times Higher Education, Huffington Post, Al Jazeera, among others. His most recent book is Cancelled, The Left Way Back from Woke, which he's here to talk about with us today. Umut, welcome to The New Flesh.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's my first podcast with a Down Under.
Well, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to come on the show, because as your book makes clear, we've interviewed some people that, shall we say, you disagree with strongly.
Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, let me just start by saying apologizing for my voice, because I was traveling the last week the whole time, so I guess I got this new variant of COVID. So my voice is a bit cracked, but yeah, I've seen it. I mean, the list that you offered me was pretty, in my view, right wing. Then again, I mean, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, you read the book, I'm not someone who is opposed to dialogue and talking through different political fences and all of that. But then I also saw, when I went to your podcast, the page, that you interviewed quite a few of people like me, heterodox leftists, people with progressive credentials. I just finished David Swift actually last night, which was really interesting.
Really great conversation. It was so rewarding. What a fascinating perspective he's got.
Yeah, well, he reminded me of what the left used to be about. I think I'd forgotten that over the last few years.
Well, I'm telling you, I have forgotten about it. I actually, I don't even. I mean, that's the reason why I've written the book. I mean, you have your questions. We'll come back to that. But there is no such thing as left today. I'm telling you. Maybe, as you said to David in that podcast, there's like the old school Marxist, a tiny minority of people who are still around and trying to fight the good fight. But otherwise, there's nothing, because what passes as left, and this identitarian left, it's not left. It's Stalinism a la 21st century. I don't consider that as left. I mean, that there's no. Can you imagine a progressive ideology which is not open to self-criticism, to science, to dissent, looking for conformity, looking for imposing its own values on the rest of society? What is that?
Well, before we leave our guests there, John and I talk about this all the time. Is there anyone you wouldn't platform or sit across the table with?
Well, I mean, I would prefer not to sit across the table with, I don't know, like, I mean, the demagogues like Milo Yiannopoulos, etc., fellow academics and stuff. Eric Kaufman, that you interviewed, I mean, he was a classmate of mine. We grew up together. We studied together. I would sit across the table. I do think that he has very dangerous ideas, but I also know that I can discuss with him. The only people that I would try to avoid, I think, would be people like, I don't know, like real kind of far-right figures, or, believe it or not, I guess I mentioned this in my email to you when we were exchanging it, and like, I don't think I would like to sit in the same table with Owen Jones and Billy Bragg.
Oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
I really want to get Owen on the show, actually.
Well, I mean, you did, or you planning to?
I would like to, because I saw an interview that he did with Ashley Frawley.
Yeah.
And which was fascinating.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and the Owen Jones of 10 years ago is a very different guy than he is today. I mean, this whole trans issue, have changed the balances, tilted the balances in such a, enormous, but also kind of skewed way, that we have a warped understanding. I mean, when I see him on Jeremy Vine show in the morning, when he speaks about cancel culture and all, honestly, he sounds to me like a demagogue. I mean, and he's, I mean, this is a well-educated, very articulate, good writer, and all of that. So, why would I try to change the mind of someone who is determined about his views, but also kind of prepared to spread the message to the masses? That doesn't seem to be a good use of my time. But otherwise, I would sit around the table with pretty much anyone, as long as there's, my kind of red line is incitement to violence, open racism, anti-Semitism, phobia, but not the way they define it. Because what is homophobia and transphobia has become one of the most contested issues in our times. So that would be the only catch. Otherwise, I'm doing an event in London with Free Speech Union, whose political stance I don't approve of, but they given me a platform. I've written to them and I said, look, am I able to speak freely, like my mind? They said yes. Do you know that? I mean, just be aware that I may criticize Free Speech Union's biased approach to cancel culture, because they don't criticize when cancellations come from the right, say against pro-Palestine views, pro-Black Lives Matters views, etc., etc. They said yes, and they even said it would be good for our audience to hear someone who thinks differently. Now, this should be coming from the left.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talk about this a lot, actually. I feel like I think about 20 years ago, particularly because you mentioned that it's an event that you're going to. I always think about the idea of going to a writers' festival like 20 years ago, and the types of different people that would have been there writing different books. There'd be conservative sort of agitators, and there'd be gonzo journalists, and all these different kinds of people all coming together. And you didn't feel the need to, I don't know, make sure like any one of them never worked again, that they were doxxed and their family lives were destroyed. I never had that impulse. Like I never went to I talk and went, oh, geez, now what I got to do is I got to get home and make sure I destroy that person's life for the book they wrote.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know that probably because I haven't written about it. But I mean, like the book was announced on the 31st of March in the UK. Polity put the tweet out. And then there was kind of a marketing thing. They published the book at the same. I mean, they published two books on the same topic at the same time. The Left is Not Woke by Susan Neiman, who is also a left-wing progressive philosopher. We are very different because she defends a back to enlightenment kind of type of thing, whereas I think that identity politics still has some things to say, not in the way it is today, but I mean it used to be. And within a couple of hours, not even a day, the woke people, the woke academics have called a boycott on Polity for publishing anti-woke books. And I said to them, I replied, because I have quite some following on Twitter, said, look, as far as I know, you haven't read the book. You couldn't have because you were not on the reviewers list. I'm talking about two well-known. I mean, one is the Cambridge historian Priyamvoda Gopal. The other one was she's at the University of Sydney, Alana Lentin. She works on critical race theory and all of them. They said that using the term woke in the title of the book, Back from Woke and Cancelled, is serving to a genocidal project. The book is not, you've read it, the book is not about the trans issue. I mean, yes, of course, race and gender are used as examples, obviously, but it has nothing to say. And the only thing that I say about J.K. Rowling is that you can't burn books. That's it. And the title of the book was enough for people with hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter to call on a boycott on an independent left publisher who is also publishing critical race theory, transgender rights, books on transgender rights, and all of that. It's at the level of caricature right now. It's like, only the problem is with real life consequences. What if Polity didn't have the backbone and canceled the book?
Well, I actually wanted to read the blurb of your book to give our audience a bit of an introduction to it, and maybe to kick the conversation along as well, because I think it sums up the current political situation quite nicely. So right now, someone somewhere is being cancelled. Off-the-cuff tweets or harmless office banter have the potential to wreck lives. The left condemns the right and the bigotry of the old elites. The right complains about brain-dead political correctness and the erosion of liberal values. In reality, both sides are colluding in a reactionary, exclusionary politics that is as self-defeating as it is divisive. Can the left escape this extremism and stay true to the progressive ideals it once professed? Where did this book come from, and would you mind giving us maybe a little bit of a deeper insight into your background?
Yeah, I mean, it's both personal and political. I wouldn't have written a book. This is my first trade book. I mean, a book that I've written for a larger audience. I published 6 books before. One of them you mentioned. It's a textbook on nationalism, which have been in print for 23 years now. You know, it's very popular and all. So I come from the study of nationalism as a political scientist, and I come from a left-wing tradition. I was raised by a Marxist father, which is, before 1980s, it wasn't such an oddity in Turkey. I mean, it was a strong left-wing tradition. Things have changed after the coup d'etats, and of course, in the last 20 years, Turkey has become a really kind of authoritarian Islamist regime. So it was my own kind of tribe, so to speak, my political tribe. And then there's a personal aspect of it, and they kind of converged around 2018. As you probably know from, it's mentioned in the book, I was living in Sweden, so I was actually exposed to some of the worst aspects of woke. The other day when I was listening to Ashley, you asked her whether Canada was the wokest country in the world, and she said Canada and New Zealand maybe. Well, I'll add this to this list: Sweden, not Denmark and Norway. Narcissism of minor differences, the Freudian, and it's a really huge. I mean, Denmark is not as woke as Sweden or Norway, and Norway is, but there is a huge difference between these countries, the Anglo-Saxon immigrant societies and Scandinavian Nordic ones. Swedes would not accept that they're woke. They're closet wokes, to use the word from sexuality and all of that. They're really hypocrites. Like, they would advertise a position. They would they won't say it's affirmative action. They won't establish a quota for women. But then if meritocracy dictates that a man gets the position, they withdraw the position. We were not, yes, and it happened several times. I can give you so many examples. There's a famous Judith Butler incident in Sweden. A political scientist, Eric Ringmar, was teaching a course. This was the beginning of the era of decolonizing the curriculum. He was teaching a course. I knew him from nationalism studies. We were at the LSE at the same time. He was teaching a course on interwar period. But for some reason, and he was forced to include some, the gender balance, etc., into his curriculum, he added a reading from Judith Butler to his curriculum. Not that he thought it would be very helpful, but, there was a lot of administrative pressure and all of that. And the students complained about it. They said they don't understand it. And they can't see the relation of Judith Butler's text with interwar period history. So the following year, he took it off his syllabus. What happened was, at the end of a protracted process, he had to leave Lund University because of this pressures and all of that. Now, and he wrote a book about this. Unfortunately, it's only in Swedish, but they did an interview with Judith Butler. I think I should say now themselves, because they changed their pronouns recently. And even Judith Butler said, no, that's not, the way you act. In Sweden, the quotas are not even like, you don't have to have a 60-40 or 50-50 women, men authors in your curriculum, in the reading list. They count the number of pages. So if you're assigning 1,600 pages in a graduate course from male authors, then you have to assign 1,600 pages from female authors. That's the level of madness. And I'm sorry to use this word. This is madness. You know,
But what if one author is much more concise than the other one? I mean, it's so stupid.
I mean, am I going to sit there and count the number of pages that I assign as readings? Let's just start
number
with
of
that.
words, number of words.
Words. And I mean, what is this like kind of, So I was cooking in Sweden, but I was too busy because, I had a little son who had a very malign and rare form of childhood cancer, neuroblastoma. So I've spent 4.5 years fighting this disease in different parts of the world. And when we lost him in July 2018, I decided first to take a leave, a sabbatical. And it was also, related to psychological issues. So I was on medical leave as well. And I came to Spain, and the idea was to write a book on the far right and populism, because I work on nationalism. It seemed to me to be the logical next step. What is the relationship of nationalism? What type of nationalism we have to have in order to get these votes going to people like Trump, I don't know, Meloni, and all of that. So, that was the idea that I had in mind. But then I was cancelled. I was cancelled by everything is in the public domain. The legal process has been over. So I can say it very easily. It was a bogus Me Too case. A person I had a relationship with outside academia just, accused me of some sort of stalking. So it wasn't sexual harassment or anything like that. I had to fight it legally, and she was convicted of defamation on 7 out of 11 counts. The process is over. So I wasn't cancelled. I survived. But the point is, I survived because I had a lot of documents that could prove that I was innocent, and I had to spend thousands of euros to prove that I was innocent in 2 countries, by the way, because the Turkish government jumped on these allegations to say that I was a terrorist as well. So I became a terrorist pervert overnight. Then I realized that the people who were attacking me were not only the Islamists, the right wing, but people from, I thought, belonged to my tribe. And these included a substantial number of my friends who could have just sent me a text message and asked me, Umut, we know you. You've never had anything in your life you've been in academia for 25 years, squeaky clean record. What happened? Just tell us. No. Virtue signaling on Twitter, outrage mobs, and I became a trending topic on Turkish Twitter for a day. I lost. Nobody wanted to represent me legally because I was too toxic. It took me 6 months to publish some documents on a blog, and then a legal victory in Sweden to come across the other side of the wall. And then I said, okay, there's something terribly wrong here. This is not the left. This is not the progressive. I didn't want to write a memoir. I didn't want to write about my own personal history. It's nobody's else, no one's business. Maybe I will one day, but that wasn't my point. I wanted to show that there's something fundamentally, let's use Shakespeare, rotten in the state of the left today, in the kingdom of the left, so-called left. So that's how the book came into being. And as I said in the prologue, I used Alice in the Wonderland and the rabbit hole. I fell in the rabbit hole and I climbed back.
One thing that confuses me a little bit, Umut, about your cancellation and this hashtag Me Too. I've been led to believe that the torch of the patriarchy burns brightest in majority Muslim countries. So in Turkey, couldn't you just laugh the allegation off and go back to high-fiving all the other men in the corporate boardroom, or has Turkey gone woke as well?
But I was having a Zoom meeting with the famous, the historical, the first of its kind, Alan Sokal, of the Sokal affair of 1996, who exposed who sent a hoax article to
yes,
the social
the original hoaxer, yes,
the original hoax, the hoax. He happened to read my book, and we started to have a conversation about this, and then we decided to meet. So we had a very long conversation. It was amazing. It was like talking to a legend, because he's done it before. Helen Pluckrose, James Lindsay, and Peter Boghossian. He's done the first thing, and the people he outed were Derrida, Lacan, Julia Kristeva, Irigaray, etc. All these people who were using mathematical theories that made no sense, basically. And as a mathematician and physician, he saw through all of these things. So one of the things that I told him is that, and I live in Spain. I mean, after Sweden, I haven't lived in Turkey for almost 15 years now. So we are very much focused on the debates and what's going on in Anglo-Saxon countries. We are interested in US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, obviously. But we don't know about the repercussions or the butterfly effect of these discussions in other countries. So the Turkey is, right now, I checked the figures for this podcast. In 2022, 392 women were killed by men, and another 226 are unaccounted for. We don't know who killed them. Basically, this is the highest number of femicide among OECD countries. In a country where a woman is officially killed by a man, of often domestic partners, the Turkish government, the chief prosecutor of the government of Turkey, started an investigation about 9 tweets which were naming me within 24 hours. And because, later on, my lawyer spoke to the prosecutor, she told us that she received a call from Ankara, and they said, kill him, take him. In 24 hours, 9 tweets, no names, no concrete accusations. The accusations were overturned within 3 months. And Turkey does not have any jurisdiction over these issues because all of these things happen in Sweden. So on the one hand, you have this real, you always talk about the tension between the cultural, symbolic left identity politics and the real material concerns of people, working classes, women, LGBTQ people, yes. In a country where there's so many femicides, these things happen. Mexico, the country which has the highest rate of femicides in the world. A children's books author, Armando Vega Gil, committed suicide after a bogus Me Too allegations on Twitter. He was accused of pedophilia. The tweet was fake. There was no accusation. There was no crime, but it was already late. He had committed suicide. This is I'm giving these kind of extreme examples because of this, So it took the government to start an investigation about me 24 hours, only to decide. So much of taxpayers' money was spent on translating documents, sending them to Sweden back and forth. And then it took us 2 years to close down that investigation. Imagine the amount of, and in this country, there is a small group of people who call themselves progressives, feminists, LGBTQ rights supporters, who were kind of trying to cancel me because, it was Turkey's academia's Me Too moment, which obviously wasn't. And you know what happened after that? After my cancellation was over in 6 months, it's been 3 years now, and no women are daring to go public and accuse the real accusers, because we know that in 80% of the cases, the Me Too allegations are correct. We have the examples of Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, lots of things. They're scared because they created an effect, a liar, very similar to the case of Amber Heard, Johnny Depp. All of a sudden, now, who benefited from this? Certainly not that person. I didn't lose my job. I was able to survive. But what about other women who are being literally now being subject to domestic abuse?
Well, that's the real trick, isn't it? As you've said, the rub between the symbols, the modern left, and material change. But this whole topic that you cover in your book, the changing focus of the left from this is just one aspect of it. From in some aspects from class into race and gender, along with the predictable and endless infighting that comes with it. No one fights themselves like they do on the left. And I got to say, Umut, I'm not angry anymore.
Yeah,
I'm simply brokenhearted. You know, I find
yeah,
it all incredible. I am so, and this is something that I couldn't picture someone on the right ever saying, how brokenhearted and sad they are about their tribe. You know what I mean? Have you
yeah.
been through this phase?
Oh yeah, I feel upset. I feel a huge despair, but also, and maybe that is why my situation, I mean, I was able to write the book that I've written, which is, as you know, it's provocative because I don't mince my words. Because I'm also angry. I feel a rage. I feel a rage towards people who've done this, despite warnings for several years. I mean, Alan Sokal did his hoax in 1996. Martha Nussbaum wrote The Paradox of the Professor of Parody in 1996 and exposed Judith Butler's faux feminism and how this would actually affect badly, would have negative consequences on feminism, feminist activism. 96, all these examples that I give in the book, we didn't listen to them. I've also blamed myself because I was never part of the tribe in the sense of, I didn't have any political allegiance with them, but it was my own, group of people. I didn't see how nasty, petty, and narcissistic they could turn if the circumstances suited them. We're assuming DeSantis and Trump and all right-wing political actors for pursuing a personal agenda, which is true, obviously. But what about left-wing so-called intellectuals and activists? I mean, I spend a lot of time discussing this dynamic between victims and perpetrators. It's not the same anymore. Is a tenured white trans activist professor, trans or cis, whatever that means, is it really on the receiving end of the power kind of binary? I mean, all women who are attacking gender critical feminists or J.K. Rowling today are themselves white. I mean, there are the stories of small people. I mean, the Laura Favaro, who published the findings of the first ever academic research on gender wars in Times Higher Education last year on the 15th of September. We are approaching the anniversary. She lost her job in 1 week, and she lost access to her own data because she wasn't. I mean, I was a senior professor, okay, so I could defend myself. Also because I had lots of, documents to prove my own case. But if I didn't have these documents, I would have been lost too. But the point is, at least I was a man, this and that. What about a junior female colleague who has a precarious job? She's a mother of 2 kids. She's trying to, with her husband, she's trying to, because we become friends now. She's trying to make ends meet because she's unemployed. Why? Because 2 full tenured professors attacked her publicly on Twitter. Right after my book was published, people who haven't read it, well, they couldn't have read it because it was published 6 hours ago. They called a boycott on Polity, saying that my book is promoting genocidal intents and stuff like that against transgender people. And as you read the book, you know that the book is not on this.
Do you think they've made a conflation between the word woke and anti-trans or something now? I mean, is
Yeah.
woke, has that now morphed into anti-trans?
I told another a friend, a podcaster who was from Brooklyn, an African American self-defined woke. I told him actually that the term woke has been hijacked twice. Once, I mean, there was the original woke of the black, movement. Even predates Black Lives Matters, by the way, against police brutality, and they said stay woke. I mean, that's a simple, non-violent call. Be, prudent. Just be aware of what can happen and all of that. Then it was hijacked by the right, as a synonym for political correctness. But then it was hijacked again by self-professed progressives to describe a certain kind of identity politics, which is individualistic, narcissistic, and also absolutist. I mean, the position of the woke left today is the Stonewall thing, like no debate. I'm telling you who I am, woman, I don't know, indigenous, that the hoax cases of these like Rachel Dolezal, etc., and you have to accept it. I mean, from the most relativistic philosophy, postmodernism, emerged a completely dogmatic moral absolutism. It's my way or the highway. So, I'm not supposed to, we're not talking about trans rights here, because nobody that I've seen, and I met quite a few, and I'm now, exchanging letters and emails and work with them. None of the gender critical feminists that I met and are retweeting me and all of that, reject that trans rights as human rights. Of course they are. What is at stake here is not that. There's a conflict of interests. And then what you do, we've reached a stage where we cannot easily or simply define the term woman. If we reach that stage, I think we need to stop and think, what are we doing? Kovadis.
Well, speaking of women, I think the problems with the modern left are illustrated nicely in your book with the exploration of two women's marches in the United States. Can you talk us through this?
Yes, I mean, I've done that. Was a stylistic trick. I mean, I like writing, and this book was kind of quite good in the sense that it I mean, because I left all the academic straitjackets aside, and because I'm used to writing. I was contributing to The Guardian until I became toxic myself between 2018 and 20. And I like this kind of way of personalistic style. So I thought, okay, let me just not, suffocate people with jargon and all these kind of discussions that, 52 types of gender and all. Let me just actually start with a real life example, a story which shows what I'm going to argue in the chapter. Now, the Women's March was one of the best examples of this. The first Women's March in Washington, Women's March on Washington in 2017, after Trump's election, was the biggest, largest march in the history of United States. And that was established by reliable, non-woke Harvard academics, MIT academics, etc., etc. Soon after the march, well, actually, even during the organization process, but soon after the identity politics came in, and then people were divided according to different identity categories. Pink pussy hats. Oh, what about transgender women who don't have a uterus? What about people of color who don't have a pink pussy? What about knitting, which is itself a colonial practice? Oh my God, I had to check this through history books to find out that it really was that. And I mean, the only connection you can find that is, white colonial settlers, women were using knitting. Yes, fine. So this starts with that. And then the organizers, they're anti-Semitist. They participated in events of the Nation of Islam of Louis Farrakhan. These are activists. They go everywhere. Why shouldn't they go to Louis Farrakhan's, meetings? Because that's where you find the working class, some of the working class Black people. And we're talking, by the way, about an organizing committee which consists of Black people, indigenous people, a Muslim, and none of them is straight. So this is the most diverse, according to the manual of DEI organizing committee you can imagine. Talks, attacks, infighting, all of these things. A year after, double the number of participants. A year after, nobody comes. The last time I checked, because also the pandemic interfered, I think in 2021 or 2022, it was only 8,000 people. So identity politics killed a movement. Another story that I use is, of course, Black Lives Matter. I mean, Black Lives Matter itself, that's something that I learned. This was positive, a positive discovery of my research. Some of the management of the movement, in particular Alicia Garza, are aware of the problems with Black Lives Matter. They know that some of their claims are too much for a certain segment of the population, i.e., defund the police. They're also aware that they could not control Antifa's violence because they were not, they didn't have a centralized organization. So the local chapters were the ones who were, doing these things. And there are also lies that we discover, actually, like, you might recall, maybe you already covered the famous Berkeley protests when Milo Yiannopoulos tried to go there. That was, for instance, it wasn't Antifa. It was right-wing protesters who dressed like Antifa people, basically to blame them, etc. So Black Lives Matter also realized that the hashtag movements, you call it, I mean, that's the moment I heard, I think, Rick, it was you, that some one of you calling the hashtag Me Too. I said, okay, these guys, I'm talking to them. No way, because I've done a lot of work on Me Too for personal reasons, but also the real Me Too is nothing like that. The real Me Too of Tarana Burke is not a hashtag movement. There is no organization. They just have refugee centers for women, for battered kids. They're doing activism. That's it. That's the only thing they're doing. But nobody knew about Me Too until Alyssa Milano came up with the hashtag in 2017, which is really sad. So what happened to Me Too now? It became a witch hunt in a lot of cases. And of course, in certain cases, because of this witch hunt, some real criminals got through the cracks, links. I'm pretty kind of suspicious. I'm not going to be commenting on a legal case, but I have to say that I'm quite kind of suspicious when it comes to Brett Kavanaugh, for instance. But we didn't have a chance to fairly judge this person because it was all over the culture wars.
We've had a similar case in Australia, quite high profile, where a lady, a young lady, accused someone of rape inside of Parliament House, and that's turned into a total debacle where it didn't even get a fair trial for the guy that was accused, and I guess the wash up is that we don't really know what happened. So
no, we don't know. I mean, and we're not always lucky to get a live kind of. I mean, we watched the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case live. We had the kind of. I mean, it was a great experiment because at least we could decide for ourselves, like the jury who was sitting there. And I mean, you can see how toxic that relationship was on both ends, and heavy substance abuse and everything. And I mean, and it's very clear that if Amber Heard had not accused Johnny Depp of physical violence and rape, she would have won. Because, we've read the messages that he sent her. I want to burn your body, dump you in a whatever sewage and all of that. But when someone claims that, she's been raped with a broken whiskey glass, and then there is the picture of that whiskey bottle intact, provided by your own attorneys the following day, then you realize. And I mean, this is also something was very kind of personal to me. The divorce money that she was supposed to donate to Los Angeles Children's Hospital, where my son received treatment, was never donated. I mean, such a simple lie. Like, it took one phone call to basically find out that this money was not donated ever. So obviously the guy walks free, even though he might be a psychological abuser. We don't know. We didn't have a chance to discuss any of these issues.
But don't you think this hyperbole and playing fast and loose with the truth has plagued the left in recent times? On Black Lives Matter, for instance, like, some of the claims that are made are just really tough to take. You know what I mean? Like, about you want to talk about about police violence. You want to talk about crime, and we've spoken to people about this. There are elements of that movement that will not face up to black on black crime, for instance. They will not face up to like actual numbers, which are bad. The numbers are bad, but they're not what they want them to be. Or it could just be the what's called in some circles sort of the want of Nazis in America, like the desperate need for Nazis, and it's just not there. They're not there. You know what I mean? Not in the way that the left wants them to be, but that's just tiny examples of hyperbole that have made these people come across as completely unhinged. And meanwhile, we're getting further and further away from building schools and helping people and making material change.
Look, I mean, and I mean, this is the reason why. I mean, I still stick to the kind of label left, because you've discussed this with your various guests. It is about class, right? It's about neoliberalism, income inequalities, and all of that. I mean, like, if you want to talk about women's rights, why don't we talk about Iran, what's going on there, or Afghanistan, or Turkey? Why aren't we talking about, for instance, and this example is used in the book, the critique of like, okay, if you look at the numbers, there is a difference between the household income of blacks and whites. The white families are 5 times more, earn 5 times more than blacks. It's getting better throughout the years, throughout 60s, but there's still a gap, which can be explained by institutional racism, by lots of other factors. But what we're not offered is the inequality within the black community. Because when you look at the numbers, and I'm not talking about like random, Pew Research or Gallup or the national statistics, you see that the black wealth, 70% of the black wealth is owned by a few families. Obama's, Oprah Winfrey, Beyonce. So it's not, you don't have equality within the black community either. And what do you do with, for instance, the Latinos who vote for Trump? What about the Asians who are super achievers, higher achievers, at least in terms of, so that these things are complicated. That's why I kind of, tried to find, what I wanted to do with the book was not only to just repeat the criticisms that lots of other people have done before or after me, but I wanted to suggest something as well, like constructive. I know that it's not perfect. I know that it's incomplete, but at least I looked for, and I discovered that there is this race class narrative that a lot of people now are using, which kind of combines these two things, like cultural recognition and economic needs. And they give this message to voters of both Trump and Biden, and they saw that people understand the message. Now, whether they end up voting for Trump or not is another question. And we're not in a position to question this if we are for democracy. Okay, you might just want a philosopher king, but that's another discussion. But the point is, there are things that are being done. We don't see these things, and instead we discuss. That's. I think that's what brings all three of us together. We discuss pronouns. I was logging into your sites and I see my name and then pronouns. And I said,
everyone hates this. Squadcast is
Yes.
if you're
I
listening
know.
here,
I can guess that it wasn't you.
But this app, everyone on the right and left hates this. They get on and they look at it and they just go, in Norman Finkelstein's got a great quote. I'm going to swear now. In his book, he says, "When I see pronouns, my first instinct is to say fuck you."
It was my first. It's my first instinct too, and I was tempted to write "fuck" as pronouns, but then I said, I know these guys. Like I did listen to their podcast. I know that it's not them. If you were them, like, and if you're true believers in that, again, I am of the be kind of brigade. I wouldn't reject. I call Judith Butler they them because that's what they want. Okay, fine. But the point is, what if I make a mistake? Am I going to lose my job? Because that happens sometimes.
Definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Like, I mean, and that's the part of I do ask in my class. I teach undergrad students in Spain. Okay, the Catalan bourgeoisie, 19-20-year-olds. I also teach in master's levels, but the first years I like teaching them because they are the generation Z. They're the generation about whom Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff have written their book, The Cuddling of the American Mind, and all. It's amazing. I mean, they're really different. And I'm Generation X, so there's like a gap, huge gap. And I tell them in my first class, look, guys and gals, I'm not going to ask your pronouns. I'm not going to censor myself in this class. So all I ask you to do is, if something that I say or the pronoun issue makes you uncomfortable, come and tell me, and I'll fix it. Don't run to the dean or write a petition or send a tweet and take a picture and then say, Umut said.
But Umut, can't you
Yeah.
just this is a good work jitsu move? Can't you just say, "Oh, I'm Turkish. Like there are other ways of knowing," and sort of go down that route. Use your background as a bit of a shield. There, you could just say, actually, I'm the minority here, and you should be
I
apologizing
don't
to
want
me.
to. I didn't want to. I could, but I don't want to. Look, I'll give you a funny thing. I don't know what. I don't think many people in Catalonia will listen to this. I use that trick when I'm talking about the Spain-Catalan issue. The independence, because
Yes.
it's so sensitive. I say, "Oh, I'm a foreigner. I don't understand," and like, it's not very credible because I'm a scholar of nationalism. Okay, so I'm supposed to know this, but I still say, "Yeah, but I'm not from here, so I don't know this." No, but in this issue, I didn't want to do that. I mean, all this whiteness crap. Look, I'm Caucasian, right? I mean, at least by the looks of it. I pass as Mediterranean in Greece, Italy, or here in Spain. I mean, nobody thinks that I'm, they speak to me in Spanish or in Catalan immediately. But I lived in Sweden. I'm a Swedish citizen. I raised a son in Sweden. There, was I white? I was a professor at a public university, full tenure, had a center and everything. I have quite some reputation in academic circles. But once I was in the street, I was a blackhead with brown eyes in the country of elves with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Aryan
Okay?
nation.
And
Yes.
it was an Aryan nation. Now, Swedes are quite polite. You will never see the racism. There is a lot of it, but it's buried underneath. It's not on the surface. But there is racism. I mean, or if I go to Germany, if I go to Britain, I mean, when I was a student and I was using, I'm going to be slightly politically incorrect here, the toilet paper that we call Turkish passport these days. I was always, like, without any exception, stopped at Heathrow, Gatwick, and Stansted because I looked non-European. So Robin DiAngelo will tell me, "You're white. Admit your whiteness," and I mean, and confess to yourself and all of that. I mean, who are you to tell me that? First of all, you're white yourself, and you. I mean, okay, that could get a little bit rude, so let's just yeah, but I mean, this whiteness is not something. I'm a white in Turkey vis-a-vis the Kurds. See, because there I am the majority, and I do derive privileges for being an ethnic Turk, whatever that means. Now, as an anti-nationalist, I reject all these categories, but it doesn't matter. It's how people perceive me. But in Sweden, I'm not a privileged white. I'm an immigrant. Nobody knows where I'm working. Nobody shouts. It's okay. When I had a very Swedish-looking baby with me, fine, it passed. But otherwise, no. So what if I come to Australia? What would I be? A white or not? I don't know.
Yeah. I think you'd probably you'd fit into it'd be Greek, Italian, Australian
Yes.
kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, something like that.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons we wanted to get you on the show as well is because your book challenges, obviously, some of the strongly held ideas in the politically homeless space. It's also very well written, your book, and I mean that. But you take on Jonathan Haidt and a few other people who've sort of been leading this charge. But one of the ideas I wanted you to talk about, because this is fascinating, now correct me if I'm wrong. I think you were saying in the book that on balance, the right are actually in control of the sort of the economic and political levers, generally speaking, whereas the
Generally
left
speaking, yeah.
has a disproportionate grip on maybe culture, like the media and arts or something.
Mhm.
Now, because I think this idea is quite shocking, particularly because Ricky and I are interested in media and arts, so it's the only game in town. Like if you're interested in media and arts, then I tell you what, I'm saying my pronouns. Whereas, so can you explain how, because I think there's a lot of people who won't feel like they agree with you. They'd be like, oh, that can't be true. The left they've got everything sewn up.
Well, I mean, I think it's depends on the context. See, I mean, if you look at it within the context of the same Anglo-Saxon countries, United States, Canada, United Kingdom, and Australia, I think Australia is a little bit different than New Zealand, for instance. But there, yes, political elites were, I'll use the term that gender critical feminists use, policy capture did happen there. I mean, look at Jacinda Ardern, or Scandinavia countries, definitely, obviously, the squad at the United States, the north of United States, and all of that. So yes, that could be qualified. But if you look at the global picture, the right is very powerful, and they also have more money. That's for sure. I mean, other than Soros and maybe Bill Gates Foundation, you would be hard pressed to cite more than 10. Okay, maybe Bloomberg. You can count them with your two hands. Whereas you have huge amounts of money going into trying to redress the balance at universities, for instance, with the establishment of Turning Point USA organizations in American universities. I still think that this is more powerful. And the point, though, is that and I think, what I was thinking there is, of course, not only political election results, which brings to power people like Meloni, Orban, Erdogan, Putin, so on and so forth. And I would wager and to say that it will be Trump and Jean-Marie Le Pen in the next couple of years as well. So there's this populist wave that the so-called left is feeding by not doing anything or by antagonizing people for simply not using the right pronouns or this and that. And economically, the money that the left has is being misused. I mean, again, I'll give you an example from a non-Western context. All the European money that came to, for instance, LGBTQ rights in Turkey, for instance, or other Middle Eastern countries, they have been kind of absorbed by a number of institutions which basically use the money to increase their own power, like Stonewall, rather than build a trans refuge, for instance. I know several examples of it firsthand from the people involved in the process. So it's like the power holders. But things are changing. You're right. I mean, one would have also questioned the opposite argument. Like, if I say that the cultural sphere domain is more controlled by the left, then one would come and say, yeah, but look at Rupert Murdoch Empire and Fox News, where 80% of Trump voters are getting their information from. So then, I think it's a generalization which is relatively okay, but as you said, it needs to be qualified. It's a good point. I wouldn't object to it strongly, for instance. And I think, by the way, as I said, in the next 5-10 years, the domination of the world will be complete, because the woke is losing right now.
You mentioned Trump and some more populist politicians there. And I recently read a book by Helen Pitt about the history of the Sydney Opera House, which I'd recommend everyone check out. It's really interesting. But one thing that struck me was that the majority of Australian politicians at that time, and we're talking 1960s, 1970s, most of them were not career politicians. You know, they came from industry, they came from trades. Many didn't get into politics until they're in their 40s. Do you think that the voting public and those who vote for populist candidates like Donald Trump, they're just sick of career politicians? I mean, is that the big appeal of someone like Donald Trump?
I'm not so sure. I mean, it's just, I think in the first time around in 2016, that played a role. People were sick of the career politicians, both on the right and the left, who appeared to have been only motivated by careerism, just the feed their own the fortunes and not do anything for the people. Now he used this very skillfully, by acting as if he is the common man and all of that. I don't think people buy that anymore because it's so obvious that he is not one of them. I mean, it's like even this kind of performative announcement of his candidacy from the Empire, the Trump Hotel in New York and everything, all this pompousness and all. But the problem is, I think that the other side, the left, is so detached from everything that we're discussing right now that grasping these kind of floating waters, and a good chunk of ordinary conservatives, not Nazis, but conservatives who would like family values, nuclear family, respect of religion, and all of that. We're losing them. We're not even speaking to them. I just saw an old, or maybe it's a new tweet by Richard Dawkins. We wrote somewhere, and he said, we're not even talking the same language. How can we debate with these people talking about the woke left? I mean, criticizing the woke left, which is the case. I mean, you might have heard about, the New Statesman, of all places, commissioned an article to Richard Dawkins about sex and gender, and then it wasn't published for 3 months because the New Statesman staff objected to it. So they brought in a psychoanalyst, Jacqueline Rose, to write about it. And it was the most ridiculous piece that I've read by an emeritus professor of psychoanalysis in Birkbeck, by the way. That was the argument,
Shouldn't they instead have brought in some psychoanalysis, a psychoanalyst to work on the employees at the New Statesman, perhaps? Because if you're a lot of these people who do this, I mean, we've got to keep it 100. We've got to be honest. I am of the somewhat be kind thing as well. But let's face it, if this was someone in your family or if this was one of your friends and they were behaving this way, you would be speaking very plainly. If this was one of your friends and they behave that way, you would say plainly, mate. You'd say, you are behaving like a tit. You are you're speaking bullshit, and just get with it and just wake up. And what's wrong? But instead, that type of honesty has gone completely underground now. Now we're left with this creepy bureaucracy with its own language, with its own codes and Soviet ways of speaking and everything, and I find that rubs so strange. I mean, that example of the New Statesman, that is textbook. I hear that now and I go, oh yeah, you can set your watch to the apologies now. Someone did one the other day.
You can find templates of apologies on Google. Yes, I've read it. I couldn't believe it. And then I went to it. I mean, there's a wonderful, amazing Atlantic article by Anne Applebaum called The New Puritans. Found it and read it, and there are templates. First of all, you shouldn't apologize to bullies. Rule number 1, if you're being bullied, you don't. If you made a mistake, yes. If there's something that you did wrong, then of course you should apologize. But one, they're not interested in your apology. They want to finish you. And you know why, John? I mean, one of the things that the reason that the honesty is dying is because people are scared. With Alan Sokal, we were discussing about this, quoting Jonathan Rauch's book on the Constitution of Knowledge. He's, one of the friends of Jonathan Haidt, the same circle. What is the effect of these cancel campaigns on the onlookers? because you can't cancel J.K. Rowling, Dave Chappelle, and they couldn't cancel me because I was big enough to survive, and also I had the truth on my side. But the point is, like, what happens to other people now? What if this happens? Like, if I go, would I have the guts to speak my mind everywhere about everything? Well, if I'm going to lose my job, I'm not so sure. I'm not saying that writing this book was a suicidal act for so many people. But okay, I mean, I tried to do it because I believe that if you don't fight now, like, it will be too late. And that's the thing. Yes, there is no honesty, and that's why I was so pissed off with my friends. Like, if I'm accused of something of which I may be guilty, by the way, why don't you just call me and say, did you do this? Did you harass someone? Did you make someone feel uncomfortable? And I say, let's just say, because we're friends and nobody's hearing, I say yes. What he or she should say to me is, you're dumbass, you made a mistake, go and apologize, and don't ever come near me if you're going to behave the same way. That's what friends for, right? I mean, what is this thing of rushing to Twitter and then, well, your David Swift told it, right? Why don't they go and work in a soup kitchen? Because nobody would see them. It's all
That's right.
about performance. It's all about being seen. That's why I keep on. I mean, one of the terms that, if you do find replace with on the manuscript on your computer, individualism and narcissism. Narcissism is the worst problem. I matter. I am a woman. I am this. I am that. That's the kind of. There's nothing wrong with individualism. I'm not saying this is wrong, but when you impose, when you dictate your subjective perceptions on not only a couple of people but on the rest of the whole population and on politics, then we're in the realm of authoritarianism.
We also see corporations jump on this too, though.
Of course.
Like, so, in recent times, the one that comes to mind for me, the most recent one, is the Bud Light campaign featuring Dylan Mulvaney, which created a bit of a storm. But how much of a problem is the commodification of identity? Is it just big companies that are jumping on this, or do you think even like painfully straight people who put their pronouns in their Twitter handle, are they guilty of this commodification?
One of the things that I tried to find an answer to is why and when and how this started. Okay, I mean, the transformation. Usually it goes, I mean, if you look at Google Trends and various things, you can trace the origins of this transformation to 2015-17, when Generation Z became the only generation in university campuses. Now, obviously, the beginnings of it go back to 1990s, the queer theory, etc., etc. Judith Butler, perhaps the first, the original. But then, this is the thing. But then, okay, let's just if we put a date on it. But how did it become so dominant, hegemonic? Well, it's because of the profit. I mean, there's big pharma behind it. The puberty blockers is a huge market. The surgeons, aesthetic surgeries of mastectomies and this and that, and these are all complicated surgeries which require lifetime medication and control. Then, of course, companies jump in on the opportunity to use Dylan Mulvaney to promote something, and all of these things. I've just recently, maybe you haven't seen that. Maybe you can share a link in your podcast. I've written a piece on luxury politics and the commodification of the left to the critique, based on a campaign of Gucci using Judith Butler's book "Gender Bodies That Matter." It's amazing, because when I saw this in 2021, Gucci does a campaign. It's called the Aria campaign. It's a Christmas campaign of a specific kind of brand of products. It's about amorphousness, it's about desire, etc., etc. And the way they're using the books by Butler, and Simone de Beauvoir. Now, there are two things here. First of all, Baudelaire and Simone de Beauvoir, you might use it. but I don't think you can use Judith Butler's book without paying copyright in an ad by Gucci. Okay, and the whole campaign is based on erotization and sexualization of desire. That's the whole thing. I can't even quote it because it's too complicated. And so what? I mean, is this how? I mean, this is the thing. And then I'm looking at the origins of identity politics, chapter 3. I mean, you know, the people who invented identity politics, the term identity politics, and practiced this. First, the Combahee River Collective, the black feminist lesbian activists, Barbara Smith, Beverly Smith, and Demita Fraser. 2 of them are unemployed. 1 of them is living on scholarships, working around. They are the ones who invented the term identity politics. And what they were doing, they were writing in 1977, they said how they were cooperating with, going back to the example of the Washington March, they said they were working together with pro-life, white women. They were working with third world immigrants because they were internationalists. They wanted to protect women's rights. And for that, now they use identity in a very specific sense. They said that they felt discriminated as lesbians and as women of color, of course. But they didn't base the whole politic on that, you know. Whereas today, and that's the term that I use in the book, for them, identity politics was about politics. For today's left, identity politics is about identity. And identity is sacred. It's beyond politics. Like honesty, don't be a tit. How can you, John? How can you even say this to a friend of yours or your partner? This is domestic abuse.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
do you know how many people have lost their jobs for doing such things? I mean, and I'm not saying that people should use hate, should refer to hate crime or incite to violence and all of that. I did also use the example of Capitol Hill riots, but that riot shows something else. The Nazi question that you mentioned, it's as if they want to see Nazis. Now, there's only one academic study, research done on Capitol Hill rioters, on the people who are actually arrested. Okay, they're not white supremacist groups. 80% of them, so more than 2/3 of them, are normal people, middle class, CEOs, dentists, doctors, and all of that. Okay, so what motivates these people? Are all of them Nazis? Like, I mean, Jason Stanley was here in Barcelona a couple of years ago, and I thought highly of him back then, before I see his tweeting and all of that. And it's like, it's the world is like, it's so easy. The whole thing is so us and them. Vox was making gains, the far right party in Spain and all of that. So Vox are Nazis. Well, Vox leaders may be Nazis, Francois and all of that. But 3 million people voted for these people. Are you telling me that 3 million people who voted for different parties before 2018 have become Nazis overnight?
I think one reason why the left wants to see these bad guys everywhere is that it means we need more DEI training, So, and
Well, they don't want
you've
to.
written about,
Yeah, they don't want to understand. They don't want to talk. They don't want to listen.
but they also want to charge you $60,000 to put you
Exactly,
through
Robin
some
DiAngelo and
diversity,
Ibram Kendi.
equity.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you've actually done some interesting stuff here. I mean, what did you find out about these programs in your
I
research?
mean,
Do they work?
it's scientifically proven that they are not only not work, they're counterproductive. I mean, I'll just actually, let me see if I can find that the part on, and there are 5 reasons for that I quoted. This is just a straight quotation from that research, from that particular research. Why DI training doesn't work, basically. I think it was in chapter 3. And by the way, to fill in the blank, you can just tell me what you think about my book as bona fide liberals, I think.
I loved your book. I thought it was fantastic and so again, challenging, and because I've read a lot of books in this space the last couple of years, and yours stands alone, and I'm always most fascinated by the books from a left perspective. And yes, I thought that the contributions were plain. You know what I mean? And I just think everyone should really check this out and start to think about where they sit on this spectrum. You know what I mean? And start to see through the narratives a bit.
Yeah, this is from chapter 3, page 79 of the book, and this is on paraphrasing the findings of the most comprehensive research on DI training, which spans a lot of institutions. The findings are simply why they don't work, because they've established that they don't work. First, short-term interventions in general do not change people. I mean, not a huge surprise, I think. Second, anti-bias training may activate stereotypes. So it actually reproduces stereotypes. Black, white, it makes you more aware of your own identity in a way that you were not before. Third, training inspires unrealistic confidence in anti-discrimination programs, DI training, that things can be fixed quickly. I pay $60,000 to Robin DiAngelo, two days of workshop, and it's done. 4, this training may leave whites feeling left out. And 5, people in general, and that's a psychological finding, react negatively to the efforts to control them. Now, going back to the question that you asked me in the beginning, one of the reasons that I kind of, took the effort of writing this book was because I was radicalized as a left-wing progressive person. People are telling me that I should do certain things, and if I don't do them, I'm a bigot, far-right enabler, fascist, Nazi, genocidal guy with genocidal instincts and all of that. And I've never bowed to authority in my life for 53 years, and I'm not going to start doing it now.
Well, in the short time that we still have you, I wanted to get your take on what do you think of the kind of strange alliances we've been seeing recently between sections of the traditional left, let's say the gender critical women and the right. We've spoken to a lot of gender critical feminists, and yeah, there seems to be a coming together of the left and right in this regard. Like, how do you think that's going to pan out?
Now, there are two different questions here, because the final question, how this is going to pan out, is a different question than the first one. I actually think, and I told this to Julie Bindel in her podcast, I actually think that this is a healthy thing, like that they can discuss among themselves. This is the true left, There are people who are actually taking money from the right, or who are producing some discourses that are, I would say, very, dangerously close to transphobia. A good example is, of course, the KJK Posse Parker situation that you went through in Australia and New Zealand as well. And some organizations which, they do good work in Britain, for instance, Sex Matters and a couple of others. But the money, the sources of the money probably is not coming people from the best intentions. But the point is, the left, the feminists, were able to discuss this. So this is healthy. At least they were having a debate. Now, how this is going to pan out, I would firmly stay on the side of the liberal progressive camp and not go on to the right. But I think this is, I see those people who are right now cozying up or getting closer to the right as my target audience, actually. Because I'm not going to change the mind of convicted cultists, either on the left, the woke, or on the right, the populists and all of that. But there is a huge, huge group of people in the middle who wouldn't want to go to, to those lengths. So I would fight with the feminists, sorry for that, and try to tell them that, look, you're not to blame for Nazis attending your demonstration and raising their fists. That's bullshit. That's something that people like Owen Jones wants to use against gender critical feminists. But having money from them is something that might skew your politics in the future, because Some of the people that you're taking money from don't want female or women to be freed. They want them to be confined back to their homes, to no more traditional relationships. I'm sure things that you've talked with Louis Perry and a couple of other people. I do see some dangerous trends. One that is clear, much closer to my own area of expertise, is this new national conservatism trend that was established by Yoram Hazony with pro-Israeli money, and it's growing and growing and absorbing more and more people. Eric is a very active part of it. But see, this is the difference. Eric and I are completely on different sides of the political spectrum, but we don't block each other. We still speak because am I going to change his mind? No. Is he going to change my mind? No. But at least we speak. And imagine that there are so many people on the gender critical side and all see these kind of nonsense about all of these things. I would recommend the book to your. I mean, it's out like a couple of days ago. A great summary of the debate on gender wars, sex and gender, by Alice Sullivan and Selina Todd, two former cancelled GC critical feminists. It's a really good summary of this whole debate on all sides, and it has representation from all sides of the political spectrum. It's a good book, and I mean, I'm learning a lot from it, and it issues a call to, which is what I try to do. We need to come back to our senses. I mean, we can't call women menstruators.
Chest feeders.
Simple as that. Does that make me right? No, I'm sorry. Your insistence of calling women menstruators cervix havers is reactionary, not my reaction to that. So you guys are not reactionary in my view, because you're talking to all sides, whatever your political beliefs are.
Well, we're very easily swayed by charm, Umut. We've saved the best question till last. Now, this is really the big one, and you're going to have to try and answer it succinctly. What does the left need to do to reform itself?
Just remember what it was. Look at the past. Revisit the old theories and all of that were, and I'm not talking about here Marx and all of that. You've done a great program with Ashraf Rowley. People can go and listen to these. I'm not saying this, but remember what the left was like just in the last decade of the 20th century. And read the stories that I tell in my book from their original sources, the Black feminist activists. I'm not talking about Black Lives Matters, their ancestors. Those who were, and that's the second thing that I would suggest, get back to reality, stay in contact with real lives of real people. And 3, and that's the most important thing, and that's how I finish my book, listen to people. I mean, the best example of that is also mentioned in this last chapter of the book. I'll be quick. Ali Russell Hochschild's great book, Strangers in Their Own Land. A Berkeley left-wing liberal professor who goes to Louisville to work on Tea Party voters, stays there for 5 years, lives there for 5 years, and ends up understanding. She was she's cited among the 3, I don't remember the other 2, but she was quoted in the New York Times among the 3 people who foresaw Trump's victory in 2016, because the book was published before Trump was elected, a couple of months before. She saw it because she lived with the people in Louisville. That's what we need to do. And I mean, just for saying this, I'm considered by my former woke friends as being right-wing. And that is the second part, detached from reality. They live in an alternative universe.
It's ludicrous. You're plainly, I mean, I don't like to throw labels around, Umut, but you are plainly on the left.
I believe in it. Look, I'm a liberal, of course, because, political liberalism, freedom of speech, academic freedom, this is this is a big, like 101. I mean, you can't be on the public arena and not be a liberal. Okay, that's one thing. But secondly, I believe in equality, economically speaking, and that makes me, more on the left. Now, I'm not talking about the socialist revolution. It's not realistic anymore. But I lived in Sweden, where the state covered all my, and still in Spain, all my health expenses. If I go to emergency, everything is covered. My son, who received, I know that he received a treatment worth millions of euros, and the Swedish state paid for it to save his life in an illness which had 50% prognosis. Now, that is the progressiveness that I understand from. Imagine doing. I'm in the Facebook group with cancer families. They are begging people for crowdfunding to be able to treat their own kids who suffer from the similar disease. So that's the left that I am. Okay, so it's not that's the pronoun.
Well, we've got the same. But it's funny you should say, because we've got the same system here in Australia. Like, and it's so funny. Even if you are a conservative and you vote that way here, you still are voting for Medicare. You're still voting for. I cannot explain our medical system to Americans. They just don't get it. I'm just like, imagine you don't have to worry about like medical stuff anymore. Imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's automatic. I mean, as a European citizen, I came from Sweden to Spain for a year. I was considered as a Swedish citizen here, but I had the same rights as Spanish citizens. Then I changed my address and everything. I wherever I go, I receive healthcare, social insurance, benefits, pensions, and all. In some places better than others, but I mean, the U.S. kids are dying in front of our eyes. In the UK too, because of the other side effects of neoliberalism. The NHS is not able to to take care of these people. So what makes me a left-wing person is economy, is my view about immigration, for instance. But here, there too, like, I'm not open borders and all of that. No, I've seen that too. I mean, immigration is also a huge problem that needs to be tackled in a very kind of complicated, sophisticated, and sensible manner, because resources are scarce. We know that. So lots of things to, but yeah, I mean, we need reality. I mean, like, someone needs to take the red pill maybe and wake up, but it's not us. It's the woke left which needs to take the red pill, because they are the ones who are living in the matrix, not us.
No, we're not in the matrix.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure which side is better, but yeah, at least it's
That's
real.
right.
I wish I was woke, man. Like, do you know, my life would be so much easier.
Believe me.
I could write a film and it would get funded. I would just go to any party.
But you wouldn't write the kind of film you want to write, though.
Yeah, but it wouldn't matter. Like, and then I could go to any party and I could just say nonsense and people, Whereas now I have to go to these things and I have to be quiet. Can't talk about the podcast,
Well, don't be. See, we are increasing. Like, see, in the last year, several books have been published from within the left. You interviewed some of them. There's Kenan Malik. There is Olufemi Taiwo. These are all left-wing critiques of identity politics. There's a lot of, PEN America did a wonderful report on the sensitivity readers and all that crap. And PEN America is very reliable, because they are the ones who documented anti-critical race theory, right-wing thing. They called it Wokelash. This woke trend of banning books, it's because it misgenders people and all of that. We need to create a Wokelash.
Yes.
Okay, I never thought of this until now, so I'll keep it here.
We should call.
I like that term.
Wokelash.
I like that term.
Yeah,
a good episode title.
let's do a Wokelash, and I mean, reclaim the progressive values. We don't have to agree on everything, but let's just agree that there are other problems that we look. Healthcare. Does anyone in this whatever podcast agree that everybody should have free access to healthcare to the extent that this is possible? No. Are we on the same political camp? No. Simple as that. There are certain values that stem from us being human. But then we are talking about, human rights is a European colonial tool for dominating. Oh my God,
Norman Finkelstein said quite simply, he put it really bluntly, he just said, cut the shit. Let's just, there's important work to do,
Seriously that, yeah. I mean, and I mean, I'm trying to do that. Yes, mainstream outlets are ignoring me. Fine. But I mean, my book is still selling. I'm still being discovered by more and more people. So, it's a small step, but it's a step forward. And what you're doing is too, by the way. I'm not saying this. I'm not saying this because you invited me, guys. I've listened to 4 or 5 of your podcasts. Okay, I didn't know of it.
Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up. But we do have a final question that we do ask all of our guests, and we'd like to know what you're reading right now.
Right now I'm reading that book that I talked to you about, actually, Sex and Gender. It's the edited collection by Alice Sullivan and Selina Todd. At the same time, I will start reading, because I haven't read that book, but I just bought it, Alan Sokal's 2008 book, After the Hoax. He revisited the hoax after 10, 20 years. And wrote his, impressions 10 years from then. So these are the 2 books that I'll be reading.
Fantastic. Always great to get recommendations. So how can people find you online, or how can people follow your work?
I have my website, which is myname.com, umutozkırımlı.com, and then I'm on Twitter and on Instagram, TikTok, wherever you have. Oh, sorry, it wasn't Twitter, right? They changed their pronouns. X.
Oh, X.
Are we supposed to be calling it X? Because I have not heard anyone use it.
I'm not. BBC makes me laugh every morning because they have to write the whole sentence. Twitter, formerly known, X, formerly known as Twitter. It's like, the second Prince moment of our lives.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it's formerly known as.
Yeah.
Well, the book is cancelled. The Left Way Back from Woke. It's fantastic, and just get it and read it.
Well, thank you for having me, by the way.
Thanks so much, Umut. That was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the New Flesh podcast. If you like our work, please consider rating us on Apple Podcasts or even writing us a review. It really does help the show reach a wider audience. We'll be back with another episode next week. Until then, long live the New Flesh.